Hello everyone, Kripparrian here. In this video I'm going to talk about the significant changes and trends that you can expect out of Mists of Pandaria on your hunter. And essentially I'll be answering two questions. First, what will gameplay be like? And what new toys will I get? So, going over the general changes first. The gameplay of the hunter is a lot more simplified in Mists of Pandaria. They actually removed the range slot, and in our case they removed the melee weapon slot. So you will not have to do any melee at all, ever, and because of this they also removed the minimum range. So you will be more or less like an elemental shaman. You just stand there, stuff goes on top of you, you keep on plowing it down with your bow. Next, they changed how the way scaling worked. So back previous Cataclysm, Wrath, Lich King, or whatever, Hunter's Mark and Aspect of the Hawk were value-based. So you just gain this much attack power, and because of that, at the start of each expansion, Hunters were very, very overpowered, and late in the expansion, they were, more or less mediocre. But they're changing Hawk and Mark to be percentage-based. So expect to be very average at the start of the expansion, and hopefully you will be on the uptrend when the gear starts to scale in your favor. Hunters also gain stealth in Mists of Pandaria. Essentially, you gain it through camouflage. So there's a camouflage glyph that allows you to move while you're camouflaged, and you will maintain stealth. But of course, you'll only move at 50% of your run speed. So this will allow you to do some interesting things in PvP, as well maybe in PvE. As far as stats are concerned, the main difference is that you will be getting your attacks dodged. So to counteract this in PvE and possibly PvP, you're going to need to stack some expertise. Now, the part that really sucks about this is if you use an attack that spends focus and the target dodges that attack, you do not gain any focus refund whatsoever. So there's going to be a little bit more RNG involved in that. They also removed a few abilities. They removed Concussive Shot altogether. They removed Immolation Trap. There's nothing like rapid recuperation in the new system, so you'll not be gaining a super amount of focus when you're plowing mobs down. And they also removed the pet focus talents, like Go for the Throat and Sick'em, so the pet focus generation will be very linear. As far as new abilities, at level 87 we get something called Stampede. What Stampede does is it brings out all the pets from your stable out for 10 seconds and they attack your target. And this is going to be a pretty cool burst ability, but because it has a 10-minute cooldown, you won't be using it in arenas. So mostly for PvE and BG fun. You get an ability called Binding Shot. What Binding Shot does is when you affect a target, it'll also affect the targets around him. And when any of these guys move within 5 yards of the original shot location, they will be stunned for 5 seconds. So when you use this on an enemy player, it will give them the decision, you either stand there and I can plow you that way, or you can move and try to get away from me, get stunned, and I'll plow you that way. Your choice. Also get something called Murder of Crows. Basically what this does is it brings out all these little bird crow things, and they peck your target for a very small amount of damage. Right now, it does about the same damage as like a regular shot, so it's not very good. But because of its execute function, and maybe if they buff the damage, we'll have Murder of Crows in addition to Kill Shot for execute, and maybe a couple other cool things. One thing to note about Murder of Crows is when you kill a target and you have your Murder of Crows active, they will just hover around you, and if you attack a new target, they will go to that target. So it's kind of like a temporary pet. It's not really like a dot, although it may seem that way. We also get something called Call Beast. What Call Beast does, it calls a little pet out and does a little bit of damage for like 10 seconds. It's pretty bad, but hopefully they buff the damage, and there'll be a choice between that Murder of Crows or the next ability, Lynx Rush. And what Lynx Rush does is your pet just attacks a target a bunch of times in 4 seconds. It's really bad on the Mists of Pandaria beta right now because it does very low damage, and if you actually use Bestial Wrath with it, I'm pretty sure your pet does less damage because it like moves around the whole time. It doesn't actually use other attacks. Hopefully they buff that, and I assume it will be a close call choice, mostly a choice of preference, whether to go with either of those 3 abilities. We also get an ability called Glaive Toss. Glaive Toss, basically what it does is it does somewhat significant damage to the target. There's no way to test it right now, but I believe it'll be a little bit more than like a steady shot, for instance. And it snares the target, and any targets that get hit by the glaives that eventually hit the target also gets snared. So it's kind of like an interesting snare mechanic range shot. We also get an ability called Power Shot. Power Shot, the damage is pretty terrible, but the really cool thing about it is it knocks the target back. So think about that. You get a ranged knockback shot, and you also get stealth. There's a lot of possibilities there when it comes to battlegrounds and arena. The other ability that we get in this tier is the Barrage ability. Barrage is basically like a channeled multi-shot kind of ability. It doesn't use as much focus, and it probably does more damage than multi-shot, but you have to keep in mind that it's a channel ability. So because of that, I don't believe you will be using auto shots during this time. And because you won't be using auto shots, I do believe Barrage will actually not be used for single target damage. A couple things they change is like Trap Launcher. Trap Launcher works kind of like an aspect, so you put it on and all your traps get launched, and then you can hit it again and it takes it off and all your traps behave like they used to normally. So you don't have to use it every single time for every single trap if you want to launch it. Also, Kill Command now has a 25-yard range, and what it does is if the pet is actually further away from the mob rather than melee range, you'll actually charge to the target then Kill Command. So there's a lot more pet mobility possibilities with Kill Command now. And lastly, True Shot is baseline. So whatever spec you go, whatever you want, you get True Shot, which is pretty cool if you're trying to solo some noobs down. As far as the glyph system, they changed it so there's only two kinds of glyphs now. There's minor glyphs and major glyphs, and the minor glyphs all pretty much are useless, and the major glyphs are the rest of the glyphs. They also changed it so almost no glyphs actually increase your damage, so you would just get the glyphs for their utility benefit. And as far as damage increasing glyphs, there are some that might do it, and that's what I'll go over first. So there's a Mark for Death glyph. It's exactly the same as Mark for Death on live, but it's in a glyph. So this might increase your damage if the fight lasts longer or you're switching targets or stuff like that. There's also a Glyph of No Escape. The same thing. It works like the talent does on live. That might increase your damage if you're doing some ad killing. And there's also Mirrored Blades. This one's kind of a stretch, but I mean there's really nothing else that might increase your damage. So Mirrored Blades, again, same thing, just like Mirrored Blades on live. Your deterrence reflects the range attacks, which is pretty cool. There's also a couple other glyphs that I think were really, really cool that I want to go over. There's Arcane Shot, which is insane for PvP. Insane. I think they made Arcane Shot glyph to replace the loss of Concussive Shot, because with Arcane Shot glyph, when you hit a target with it, it snares them 50%, but it does more than that. It also caps their movement speed. So if there's a rogue sprinting at you and you Arcane Shot him, you can still run away. That's what makes it so cool. Also, Explosive Trap, you can glyph it for a knockback effect. So obviously this is some sketchy shit that I'm thinking of, but I think with the Explosive Trap knockback and the Power Shot knockback and with stealth, you can pull off some amazing looking combos in PvP. Lastly, my favorite glyph, it's called Glyph of Endless Wrath. So when you have Bestial Wrath on your pet and you have this glyph, your pet cannot die. So you're thinking, oh, that's pretty cool, but Bestial Wrath's only 10 seconds. Yeah, but as you'll see later in the talents, if you look into it, Bestial Wrath is a 1-minute cooldown, and you can actually get Bestial Wrath BBM and have Readiness. So you can chain two of these. You can have an unkillable pet for 20 seconds. You can imagine the soloing potential for that ability. As far as talents are concerned, talents are very different from how they are set up now on live. Talents are actually totally separate from specs, so they have nothing to do with the specs. You choose your spec, and then you choose your talents. Talents are separated into 3 tiers. You have 3 choices, and there's a bunch of tiers here, and you get 1 point for each tier every 15 levels. So there's not many talents to choose from, and let's go over them real quick. So all these first tier talents, they're based on disengage. Exhilaration is pretty cool. So it's a 15% heal, which can crit whenever you disengage. And you get Post Haste, which is the same on live. I really like that ability. I'd probably use that for PvE. Next tier, you get to choose between Silencing Shot, Wyvern Sting, and Binding Shot. I've gone over Binding Shot earlier in the video, and the other 2 abilities work exactly like they do on live. This is going to be a big preference tier. Next, we have Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. This is really cool because you reduce the cooldown of disengage by 60 seconds, disengage by 10. Those are big values compared to how they are on live with this ability. Aspect of the Iron Hawk gives you a 15% passive shield wall. That's pretty cool. And Spirit Bond gives you 3% of your total health every 2 seconds. Next tier, we get Fervor. Fervor is on live, and it's a pile of crap, but fervor on the Mists of Pandaria beta is actually pretty good because, contrast to how it is on live, this ability does actually not use a global when you cast it, and it has a 30-second cooldown. So 30 seconds, 50 focus off global cooldown, that might be a winner for damage in this tier, even though this tier also has readiness, as you can see. So readiness is pretty good. 3 minutes, the same thing, and Thrill of the Hunt. It's a pretty RNG that allows you to fire shots for free if you get lucky. Next tier, you get to choose between Murder of Crows, Call Beast, and Lynx Rush. None of these abilities are any good on the beta, but based on how they shift the values, there's probably going to be a clear winner for like PvE, and for PvP, probably more of a preference bursty kind of choice. Next tier, level 90 tier. Again, the Glaive Toss, Power Shot, and Barrage. In my opinion, I think Glaive Toss might be used for PvE for a damage increase, but there's no question in my mind that Power Shot is going to be the go-to PvP talent in this tier. Now with specs, you just choose whatever spec you want and you just get everything in it. There's no selection, there's none of that. So going over it, we got BM. BM's probably the spec that changed the most with the current Mists of Pandaria changes. You get an ability called Beast Cleave, so whenever you use multi-shot, all the pet attacks become AoE. So this is going to definitely solve the low AoE damage potential of a BM Hunter on live. This might actually put BM Hunters on top for AoE come Mists of Pandaria. They also changed Frenzy and Focus Fire. As you can see, the haste value given by these abilities is much, much higher than it is on live, but because it is a chance to add a stack on Frenzy rather than every single time, the problem is the uptime. So if you calculate the uptime compared to how it is on live, the average haste is actually about the same. But if you save 5 stacks, it allows you to do a lot more burst if you're BM. So there's going to be a lot more strategy involved based on what kind of boss mechanics you're facing in PvE and based on the PvP situation. That's a very interesting ability that's going to have a lot of customization. Next, like I said earlier, Bestial Wrath. It's a 1-minute cooldown rather than a 2-minute cooldown. So you get a lot more of that. And Invigoration, you get like a burst focus. So Invigoration on live, it just triggers constantly and it's for a small amount of focus. But on Mists of Pandaria, you get 20 focus immediately whenever it procs. So because of this, if you're doing BM PvE, you're going to want to keep your focus below 80 at all times, just so this proc is not wasted. Moving on to Marksman, you can see the abilities you get, but they're all practically exactly the same as they are on live. There's a few variations, but I mean, whatever. Survival, more or less the same thing. They did change one ability quite a bit, though, and that ability is Black Arrow. So Black Arrow no longer has a cooldown, but now actually has a cast time of, I believe, 2 seconds. So because it has a cast time and it's not included in Aspect of the Fox, you actually have to stand still to use Black Arrow. But not only that, you can use Black Arrow on multiple targets at the same time and keep 100% uptime. So it's a little bit of a different dynamic with Survival if you choose that spec. So all things considered, gameplay is going to be pretty similar. There's going to be a few new dynamics and a few new abilities you're going to incorporate to rotations that are going to seem similar to the ones you have now. But once you get used to those new dynamics and additions, it'll probably feel about the same, at least in PvE. In PvP, I suspect we're going to have a lot more frustrated people. On their end and on ours. I mean, with the stealth and the knockback capabilities, you're going to mess up some people in BGs. But at the same time, there's not going to be as much skill involved in playing a hunter in PvP. There's no minimum range, there's no melee. You're just going to stand there and shoot people all day. There's nothing to it. But at the same time, because your shots can be dodged, and in PvP your targets can have huge dodge, like, Feral Druids and Rogues, 20, 30, 40, 50% in some cases, it's going to be a lot more RNG based, You may lose to one of those classes just because you got unlucky and for no other reason, and that's really going to suck. All encompassing, the best thing, in my opinion, about Mists of Pandaria Hunters is the choice. You get a lot of abilities, but a lot of them have nothing to do with your damage throughput. They have to do with your utility, small differences in survivability, and things of that sort. So you'll be able to choose what you want to do with your class, and it wouldn't affect your performance. If you want to compare in a way, like, let's say in Wrath of the Lich King, a lot of hunters really wanted to be BM, but BM was terrible. So, they just went BM, but they were labeled noobs. What kind of noob goes BM? BM's crap. But hey, they wanted to go BM. Cool thing with Mists of Pandaria is you can do that. You can do that and probably get away with it pretty well if you got the rest of your fundamentals down. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed Mists of Pandaria if you plan on playing it, and I'll see you guys next time.